So hello everyone. I'm John Mathers. This is the second of our mini podcasts that we're doing, and I'm delighted to be joined by Shain Khoja, who we call Shain. And it's wonderful that she's joining us from Canada, where she is in Vancouver at the moment for her son's wedding. So I'm really pleased that you're able to join us, Shain. Thank you so much. And Andy Robinson from Codebase in Edinburgh. So, Shane, maybe you could start and tell me a bit about yourself, what you do, how you got involved with the Healthier Working Lives program.
Terrific. Thanks, John, for having me on this podcast. I'm a physical therapist, a physio by profession, and then I've spent a long period of time doing technology for social good. And I sort of got involved in the whole care sector because I had a personal issue caring for my mum and juggling all these different apps, and then saw what Healthier Working Lives was doing and applied to participate. Having attended your first session and sort of done the discovery with a wonderful care service called Bandram, we decided that this would be a good project to sort of engage in from beginning to end. So that's been an exciting work in progress. It's had its challenges, but I'm sure we're going to discuss that further down.
Okay, we'll come back to that, and thank you very much. And welcome. Could you tell me a bit about you and what you've done? You've had a very illustrious career to date, and also tell us a little bit about Codebase and what you do at Codebase.
Sure. Yes, so my name is Andy Robinson. My background is in tech startups, building software, working with early stage companies. So previous experience really is starting and working with a lot of early stage tech companies and building a lot of early stage tech companies. So previously had a software consulting business called Cultivate. We worked with probably over 100 different businesses on building early stage software, prototyping, and then all the way through to delivery. We worked very successfully with Deliveroo. 2019 sold the company to Deliveroo, then headed up the tech team for Deliveroo here in Edinburgh. Left that and have been involved in a number of different startups from inception through to getting first customers and sort of going through that process again. Another thing that I do is work a lot with Codebase. Codebase are the largest tech incubator in the UK. Our office was based there, so it is a physical location here in Edinburgh. Also, I'm a mentor for Codebase, so that involves supporting huge number of early stage tech businesses and through growth from sort of an inception of an idea all the way through to becoming more of a scale up. So I do a lot of mentoring with them. A lot of what they do is kind of education. So I got involved with this project a few months ago, trying to support from a mentorship perspective and bring some of the tools that we have at our disposal in Codebase to this project. So I've been working with Shain and Bandram, which has been great fun.
Right, thank you very much indeed. So maybe you could, maybe Shain, you could tell us a little bit about the program that you're working on with Bandram and the sort of progress that you've made to date, and also the sort of timescales you're working to. I know it's very difficult with the care sector and so busy and getting time with the care sector, but the sort of timescales you're working to, and what happens next, really.
Sure. No, we sort of met with Bandram in person at the kickoff, and we realized very early on that whilst this project is about how tech can help the care sector, we needed to get on a level keel with them. For a lot of the care home delivery companies, they're looking at technology as, all these vendors descending on them saying, we can do this, without any context of what they're dealing with on a daily basis. And so fortunately, Andy, Iffy, and I, the three of us are on this team from the sort of consulting side, if you'd like.
Who's Iffy?
Iffy is the third member of our team who basically has a public policy and research perspective. And so that's what's been so...
She works for Scottish Care, doesn't she?
For Scottish Care. And I think what's interesting here is we've got Andy, who's got, sort of scale up technology background. You've got me that's got sort of healthcare and actual caregiving family issues, as well as sort of some technology. And then we've got Ife. So that makes a really nice rounded group. And I think what we've realized is that we really needed to get on the ground at the level that Bandram is dealing with issues, because you can't get in at the level where tech can help. This is a chicken and egg situation. So you really need to get in on the ground. They're struggling with staffing issues. They're struggling with cash constraints. They're struggling with where to find the new workforce. Younger people don't understand what's going on, what's required in delivering a care package for an individual. And, today the pay that they can offer is sort of 10 pence more than getting paid working at McDonald's. And it's certainly less than the manager at McDonald's. So that just puts the perspective on how difficult this problem is, and it is a systems problem. So this is a 6-month project overall, we hope. And what we've started with is really sort of getting down on the ground, looking at the ecosystem and understanding it, getting the stats around what the issues are around recruitment, retention, funding, training, etc. And then what we've done is we've actually gone in to Bandram and met the owner, the managers, the sort of more experienced staff, some of the newer staff. We've seen the type of care and the facility that's available. And then we're bringing all that together in a more focused manner, because we can't solve the system. But there are wonderful things happening at Bandram where they've really got it right. And so what can we learn from that? Where can we tighten up this problem so that it can be applied to industry wide? And then how can we deal with trying to solve that problem? So we're at that place where we've created a problem statement, we've set the background, and we've kind of defined broadly the goals that we would like to get. And this is where we're getting confirmation from Bandram and their staff. And I think the key piece here is that we've built trust. They don't feel that we're trying to sell them a package. We're trying all the way to work alongside with them as a partner as opposed to a vendor. And I think Andy can probably add a bit more to this.
Yeah. Well, Andy, I mean, I'm particularly interested in, everything that Shane's talking about is talking about the fabulous principles of co-design, of really understanding the problem. And I'd love you to tell me a bit more about the problem statement, because I know this was something that you and a colleague, Callum, really came up with.
Sure.
Over to you.
Sure. I think generally coming from a software development background and following good principles of building early stage software really comes from a place of understanding the holistic world in which you're operating. As Shane said, we don't want to go into a sector and start throwing buzzwords around and telling them that we're going to be able to solve all of their problems and issues with technology. I think technology is a tool that solves human problems, and if you can't ultimately understand the problem, it doesn't matter how fantastic and shiny your technology is. So a lot of, ironically, in my past experience of running a software consultancy business, a lot of our time was spent telling people not to build any software until they really understood what it was that they were building, and not to solutionize too quickly, because as anyone who's built software will understand, you build something, half of what you built is probably not particularly useful. You're missing half that you didn't know that you needed. So it's about the sort of evolving process of how you start to build something that is ultimately solving a human problem. So one tool that we like to use is called the problem statement, which is really to say, how do we build a holistic understanding of the problem without jumping to solutions? So it's about setting the background, the context, the sort of specifics in terms of how the problem impacts individuals or people, or the sector at large, and then sort of removing any form of solutionizing to the point of getting on a shared understanding of what problem we're going after. So we've been collectively putting this together using sort of industry stats, talking to folks from Bandram, and also, you know, wanting to involve them in that process to say, this is how we think you see the problem. Is this correct? And is there anything missing here? Instead of, you know, talking at them and selling this idea of what needs to be solved. So I think it's following principles of good design, it's following good principles of good research. But ultimately, the intention is to make sure that we're all aligned on what success would look like in terms of measurable outcomes. So a big portion of it is to say, what might we see in terms of change? What measurable things could we look at? So that'll either be a change in a number, a metric, you know, a reduction in, you know, if we're taking the example of recruitment retention, are we seeing higher retention rates after 3 months or 12 months? Within the sector, there's, you know, really high levels of staff loss within the first 3 months and then 12 months. Or are we attracting more or more individuals that are turning up to interviews, for example? There's a huge number of individuals not turning up to interviews. It's almost 40% in the sector. So how can we better target people, or better come up with potential learnings here that may involve some element of technology, but ultimately, as Shain said, are there things that Bandram are doing that we can learn from and apply across the sector? Bandram is definitely an outlier in terms of its numbers, particularly around retention. It has, you know, a huge number of staff that have been there for a significant number of years. I think it's something like 50% of their staff have been there for over 10 years. And if you look at the, you know, if you look at the stats in the sector, that is a big outlier. Yeah. As Shain said, there's some magic there, but I think if we can look at what can be learned from them and potentially apply that across the sector, that'd be great. Also, you know, they still struggle with the same sort of measurables that we discussed there in terms of folks turning up, attracting or not attracting the right folks, and also looking at this new generation of potential care workers, because it's all very well having lots of experienced staff in the organization, but those staff will eventually leave, and if we don't replace them with new folks, then we lose all of that opportunity for them to be mentored and coached and to learn. So the whole idea of the problem statement is to say we're all on the same page here around what we're doing, and we all know what we would like to see in terms of measurable outcomes. So hopefully that shines a bit of light on it.
Great. So Shain, just as Andy was saying, the understanding the impact that you might make, so putting the measures in place from an early stage about the sort of shift that you're going to hopefully achieve and the sort of change that you're trying to effect is quite important.
It's very important, because otherwise you can go all over the map with this. And I think those measures have to be meaningful for Bandram. So, for example, you know, as Andy put it, they've got retention 10, 15 years of older staff that have been there, and the younger staff are not staying that long. You know, it's a hit and miss for them. So identifying how we get that retention and how we get to that number is really important. Now, over a 6-month or a 3-year project, you know, the measures have to be meaningful. So we're looking at things like, how can we get more applicants turn up for the interview? Is there something about the way in which the position is advertised, the descriptors that are used, etc.? You know, what training skills would be needed in an interview in order to trigger those individuals to get really excited about the job at hand? What's working in their training, what's not working in their training? So there are some micro numbers here that lead into the larger numbers, but we need to get there. And I think part of my thinking about this is that if we can solve the most frontline problem that they have, which is staff, right? Staff is not just day-to-day hourly care, but it's the future of this company, because if they don't fulfill them, eventually they're not going to be able to care for the people that pay their wages. So if we can solve that and they've earned our trust, then we can sort of say, well, see how technology has helped this.
Yeah.
We can now give you this technology that can help that, that can require you to have fewer staff, etc. So I think the key piece here is not just getting the measurables, but getting their thinking aligned with ours, you know, so we're both learning. It's not like we know it and they don't, or they know it and we don't. It's kind of bringing us together and saying, okay, these are the baby steps and this is where we're heading, so that even when we disengage, they're still measuring that metric and going forward. And I know it sounds very painful, because it can be. But I think that doing it this way, we're going to get change that's going to be measurable, that's going to be retained. It's not going to be a flash in the pan and then disappear. It's a foundation on which you can continue to build.
Great, thank you. And last thing, Andy, from you, maybe I know you and I have talked often about concentrate on the problem, not the solution. And you've also talked very compellingly about don't try and solve the big picture. Solve one thing at a time, take one problem at a time. You want to just articulate that better than I've just done?
I mean, I think if you look at any problem solution fit, it comes from a place of deeply understanding the problem, right? And I think one thing that I try to do myself when I'm working on something and encourage other businesses and companies that I'm working with is to fall in love with the problem, and then that will drive a lot of other things. It drives, you know, how you communicate your business externally. It drives really every element of decision making around the product. So that the combination of falling in love with the problem and getting that customer on side, or that user, or the industry as a whole around, yes, we're all pulling in the same direction, and by working together in this project, we're going to try and achieve these measurable goals. It's far more compelling than I have a solution that I want you to buy. And I think that any sector that is reasonably traditional and is not, you know, constantly thinking about technology doesn't, like, nobody thinks like entrepreneurs think, really, apart from entrepreneurs. And therefore, sometimes there's a bit of a period of coming down to earth and saying, well, actually, what would a very quick win be here for an organization? And what tools can we use quickly to get that right? And I think, you know, having solutions that you can use to prototype and start, you know, just getting something in and demonstrating, okay, well, if we did this a little bit first, would that be a good start? That's how you build trust. But ultimately, that's how, when you're making product decisions, you're able to have a much more contextual understanding of what it is that you need to do from a solution perspective. So very rarely is the solution perfect up front. It generally comes from a insight, from a view of how something could be better, but then pulling that back to, you know, let's get really clear on the problem. Let's get really clear on what's driving the reality of the use case, which I think is a really important thing, particularly in a sector like this, where you're saying, well, of course you should be using artificial intelligence because you can achieve X, Y, and Z. And they're saying, we're still using paper. We're not even thinking about software yet. So, you know, I think
let's not run for
do less better, I think.
Yeah. Great. Well, look, thank you so much for both of you for spending time with me. What you're doing is a really important thing, and I wish you all success. Hopefully we'll be able to catch up again in a couple of months' time to see how things are going. And in the meantime, Shain, I hope your wedding goes extremely well.
Thank you very much. Take care. Thank you. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you very much.